Oh, you thought I forgot about that keyboards, didn't you? Welcome back to FCW Tech. I'm your host, Isaiah. Today I have a 91 key switch test. So a little bit up from the previous switch test video, which was 72 switches. And now that key switch test video is with some pretty bad switches. We had things like Cherry MX Browns. We had things like, I don't know, what was another kind of sus switch from that switch test? We had some Cherry MX Blues. I mean, we had like Scratch City. We had like unlubed creams. It was not a fun time. I mean, it was at the time because I didn't know what I was talking about when it came to keyboards. But now we have some enthusiast switches ranging from like the Gateron Black Ink V2s. We got Glorious Panda switches. We've got all kinds of Akko switches, all kinds of Tecsee switches. We've got everything. So Holy Pandas, of course. So basically what I did is I went out and I got two 60 slot switch testers from Flash Quark, and I got the NP-PBT blank white keycap set from Divinity, and then I wrote the names of each switch on top of the keycap, so you will know which switch I am testing as I test it. Of course, I will also have in the corner of the screen, I'll have a thing also saying which switch it is at the time. So yeah, we are going to do this. Basically, we're going to start off with the linears. I tried to have it in some kind of order, so we got a bunch of Akkos, then a few KTTs, and then some GATs, and then, you know, going by company. We got the linears here, and then these four on the bottom of this one are also linears, and then up here, these are all the tactiles that I have for today. I don't have any clicky switches because there aren't many enthusiast clicky switches, to be honest with you, and I didn't really want to split it up into 3 categories because then I probably would have had to get 3 of these. But please drop a like on the video because this overall cost me around $200 because I had to get individual switches from Flash Quark, from MechBox. The shipping on MechBox is insane because it's from the UK and I'm in the US. Shout out to Matt from MechBox, by the way. Customer service there is amazing. Would highly recommend MechBox. I'm not sponsored in any way. But yeah, so I spent like $200 on this video with the keycaps, the testers, the switches. I had to keep getting replacement switches because stuff wouldn't fit in. I had to get more lube. I had to get more films. I had to get a lot of stuff. So anyways, without further ado, let's test out some switches, shall we? All right, guys, so that was a very interesting switch test. After that 91 key switch test, I went back, I looked at the footage, I identified 5 linear switches that were standouts for being really good, and 5 that were standouts for being really bad. And I did the same for the tactile switches, despite there being much fewer tactile switches. But regardless, for linear switches, I would first like to highlight as a good switch the Gazoo Boba LT, or the linear Thok. It is the thockiest switch I have ever used. I will do a slightly, I mean, obviously the camera is far away now, but here it is. That is so nice. It gets me going every time. Next, I'd like to highlight the Gateron Black Ink V2, which is also thocky. That's what it's known for, and I was able to confirm that, yeah, it's true. So here's that. Slightly different sound profile than the Gazoo Boba LT, still very thocky switch. It's quite clear. Next is, this one was surprising. The JWK Silk Emerald, not exactly thocky, but I would describe it as being poppy AF. It is so poppy. This is the JWK Silk Emerald. It's very nice. If you like that poppy sound profile, I think the JWK Silk Emerald is the best option. Next, the 4th switch I'd like to highlight as being good is the TTC Gold Pink. If you're not a big fan of Thok, the TTC Gold Pink is very clacky, and it does it very well. Remember, thocky is not necessarily good, and clacky is not necessarily bad. They're just different sound profiles, and everyone prefers one over the other. Me personally, I like Thok a little better, but I can appreciate a nice clacky switch like the TTC Gold Pink. And then the final switch that I like to highlight as being really good is the Momoka Flamingo. Now this surprised me. It sounds just like the Momoka Frog. Here's the frog. It sounds just like that Momoka Frog switch, which is pretty nice, except the Momoka Frog has some spring ping and the Flamingo doesn't. So I really like the Momoka Flamingo. Here's that. Here's the frog. You might be able to hear that spring ping. I certainly can. But then the Flamingo, same sound profile, no spring ping, great switch. Now I'd like to highlight some bad switches. So my first linear switch that is not so great is the Tecsee metal-coated golden switch. It's very rattly. I don't want to listen to that. Next is the Zeal Healios V2. This is a silent switch, but it's very mushy. Linear silent switches can be done right, but they can also be done wrong, and I personally think this one's pretty mushy. Feels like I'm touching wet swamp grass, and I don't like it. Next is the Gazoo Boba Gum Silent. So I really like the Boba, the LT, the linear Thok, but the Boba Gum Silent is also quite mushy. Here's that. I feel like it tries to achieve its silent nature by just being ridiculously heavy to press on, which is not the way to go. Next is the MX Black Hyperglide, the Cherry MX Black Hyperglide. I found it to be pretty scratchy, despite the Hyperglide, you know, the modding, the refresh, whatever. It's still a Cherry switch. It's still scratchy. It actually has a pretty satisfying, clacky sound, but when you listen closely, and I could hear it more in the sound test, it was scratchy-er, not quite as bad as like brown switches, but... And then the final one is the Aqua King. The Everglide Aqua King is the final one that I'd like to highlight as being bad. I found it to be fatiguing, quite honestly, but here it is. It's not particularly heavy. There's just something about it. It's weird. It also sounds completely different without the keycap and with the keycap. Without the keycap, it's a silent switch, basically. With the keycap, it's clearly not a silent switch, so it's very strange. Whereas the Boba Gum Silent, it's silent with the keycap off, but it's also silent with the keycap on. The Akko King V3, you put a keycap on, becomes a totally different switch. So I don't know what sorcery Everglide is up to, but we're going to move to tactile now. So the 5 that I would like to highlight as really good are, first, the Inver and Drop Holy Panda, which is the greatest switch of all time. Next, I would like to highlight the Tecsee Purple Panda, which is a clone of the Holy Panda, and I think it's a dang good one. It has a slightly higher sound profile than the Holy Panda, but it feels really good, like pretty much just as good when you're actually pressing on it. Next one that I'd like to say is very good is the Neapolitan Ice Cream switch. This one surprised me. I just find it to have a very deep and full sound to it. It's just satisfying to listen to. There's a little bit of spring ping, but generally it's a very deep and full sound. It just really, I don't know, it just captures the essence of like that deep sound. I feel like when you imagine a tactile switch, you imagine something like that. Next is the Feker Smoky switch, another surprise. I found it to be just generally light, smooth, and pleasant to type on. I feel like I could type on it for like 10 hours, and I would not get tired. Final one I'd like to highlight as being pretty good was the Divinity Saru switch, which I found to have what I would call a tactile thock, which thocky switches are generally associated with linear switches, but I actually found the DK Saru switch to be relatively thocky, even for a tactile, which is interesting, but here it is. See what I mean? It has that deep thocky sound, even though it's a tactile, which I just found to be really interesting, so I wanted to highlight it. Next is, we're gonna transition into the worst tactile switches. Some of these are very bad, like the first one I'm about to mention, and some of them are not as bad. I just needed to fill 5, and there's not as many of the tactile switches. But regardless, the Durock Silent Shrimp, the Silent Shrimp, it seems pointless. It is a silent tactile switch. Who the heck wants that? Because it doesn't even feel like you're typing on a tactile. I mean, when you're really focusing on it and you're pressing down on it slowly, you can tell the tactile bump is there, but it just defeats the purpose. If you want a silent switch, you get a linear switch. I'll never understand silent tactiles. Anyways, I feel like it's pointless, and I think it's the worst switch in the whole roundup today is the Durock Silent Shrimp. Listen. I can't even describe that. It's just utterly unpleasant and just weird. Next is the Drop Holy Panda X. I found this to be mushy and just a cheap version of the Holy Panda for people that can't afford the Holy Panda. But if you want a cheap version of the Holy Panda, you just get the Tecsee Purple Panda. You do not get the Holy Panda X. Not for me. Next is the HyperX Aqua switch. Honestly, not terrible, and I get why a lot of people like it compared to, say, like cherry brown switches in a similar like Corsair board, because obviously the HyperX Alloy Origins core is a very popular gaming keyboard, and you can get it with Aqua switches, and a lot of people praise that keyboard for its switches, but compared to these other Enthusiast switches, it doesn't really stand up to it. I found it to be pretty harsh. It's kind of a harsh sound for me. I don't love it. Next is the Zealios Xylent V2s, or the Zeal PC Xylent V2s. Really bad spring ping, like probably the worst of any switch I tested today. Just terrible spring ping. And it was almost squeaky. It sounds like a mouse. It's so weird. Let's find, here it is, the Xylent V2. I heard it better when I was testing it a few minutes ago, but it's almost like when it was going back up, it's like a poorly lubricated spring, which I lubed the spring, just like the same way I lubed all the other springs. But it's like that squeak, like that grunt, like the, like it's like metal on metal. It sounds so weird. It's like a squeaky noise. And then the final switch that wasn't very good. It's kind of a stretch. I just needed a fifth one. There were only 4 tactiles that really stood out as being bad. The fifth one that I'm going to mention, I didn't love it because it was mushy, but it wasn't terrible, and that's the Everglide Oreo. I actually think it has a really unique sound, but it is mushy to press on. I hope you enjoyed my 91 key switch test. Here's the thing again. Here's all the switches. You can even see in the back. You can see the menagerie of colors. It's pretty interesting to look at. But I will be keeping these for a while. If anyone wants information on a particular switch, leave a comment. I'd be happy to respond. I want to say I've been really touched by the kind comments you guys have been leaving me on my Corsair fans video. You guys have been extremely nice to me there, saying that I did a great job, and I just want to say I really appreciate that. I've also been getting, a guy messaged me on Reddit the other day, and it was like, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I have a question about this. Could you answer it? And that's happened to me twice now, and once it was just a guy saying, I see a lot of potential in you. I see you, like, I see Linus in you. That something like that, and it was like, that's the best compliment I've ever received. So just thank you for your positive comments, guys. I love making these videos for you. I haven't been making too many because, again, senior year of high school, I'm applying to colleges right now. I will update you guys on that eventually later in the year. But I hope you enjoyed the switch test, and yeah, see you guys.